masing-masing berdoa dipersilakan. Terima kasih, Ibu Eri. Saya tahu di Esa Unggul baru saja dimulai kuliah kemarin, tapi masih schedule-nya mungkin berubah tambah ubah-ubah tuai kata orang Malaysia. Karena itu mungkin sebagian mahasiswa bisa join, sebagian belum. Tapi sekarang juga sudah banyak mahasiswa saya juga join. Karena itu Ibu kami persilakan untuk presentasi sebagai pembicara pertama. Nanti soalnya Associate Prof Mariama dia join agak lambat sedikit karena belum makan, habis keluar dari lab dia akan join. Jadi 145 beliau akan join. Ibu sebagai pembicara pertama, silahkan Ibu Eri gunakan waktu 30 ke 35 menit. Boleh share screen sendiri atau mau dibantu Bang Ika, mana Ibu enaknya aja. Ibu sekarang co-host, therefore you can use chatbox, you can use screen. Jadi nanti teman-teman yang ingin bertanya bisa kirim pertanyaan ke chatbox atau boleh langsung ke email saya yang sudah saya hantar di chatbox. Tanpa membuang masa lagi, saya mengundang Ibu Eri sebagai first speaker, Dr. Eri Yudia Mulyani, sarjana gizi Magister Science, lecturer at Unggul University. Time is your book. Boleh guna English, Malay language atau bahasa Indonesia, no problem. Jangan pakai bahasa Jawa dan bahasa Sunda ya, saya tak paham sangat. Oke Bu, silakan.
Terima kasih Prof. Reja ya. Thank you very much for all of you here. Good afternoon everybody. Okay, we'll start for present about my topics ya. Okay. Sorry. It's already show in the.
Yeah, very clear. Yeah. Very clear okay. with nice color. Brown.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Okay, our topic is about pregnancy, parasitology, and we need deeper understanding. This is the big thema, yeah, or big topics. But actually, here I would like to share about the hydration in pregnancy. Yeah, hydration in pregnancy. Also, we know water and pregnancy. Water is very important, yeah, for our life, yeah. So in the human, we are need to drink water, to use the all of the activities, yeah, in our life. So this is the first, yeah, the topic what we are talking about, yeah, is psychological changes in pregnancy, nutrition needs during pregnancy, dehydration, nutritional status, and weight during pregnancy. This is for our topic that we want to share, yeah, and okay. So for the first, here we know, as we know, yeah, a pregnancy is a process of union of an ovum and a sperm followed by implementation. And we know that the gestational period, yeah, have the trimester, yeah. The first trimester is 12 weeks, yeah. Second trimester is about 13 until 27 weeks. And or third trimester more than 27. So it's mean the 28 until 40. Yeah. So here, what the change during pregnancy. The first, as we know, cycle changes, hormonal changes, cardiovascular changes, respiratory changes, endocrine changes, and changes in skeletal bone density. And also, as we know, for the nutrition needs during pregnancy. As we know, during pregnancy, there is an increase in food intake to meet the nutritional needs of mother and child. So it's very important to support the fetus growth and development and also mother's health. And micronutrients are needed in greater amount than micronutrients. For example, here for carbohydrate, as we know, carbohydrate is the main source of energy, and also the pregnant woman, here we recommend to consume is about 45 until 60% of their daily needs. And IOM, or the Institute of Medicine, recommends that adults consume about 175 grams of carbohydrate per day. And also the another recommended from the Singapore Growing Up Towards Healthy Outcomes, or we call this GUSTO, that state the carbohydrate intake has a significant influence on the length of baby. And other study also have said the carbohydrate also relate to the growth and weight of the baby birth. What's happen if the deficiency of carbohydrate? The first, impair fetal growth, decrease maternal weight, fatigue, neurological damage, and disruption of blood flow. So this is about the carbohydrate. So we know that the carbohydrate is very important, for the during pregnancy. And the second is about the fat. As we know, the function of fat is the absorption of some vitamins, and also excessive consumption of fat can harm the health of mother and fetus through conditions such as for the obesity and metabolic disease. Also, fat intake during pregnancy increase about 20 until 35% of total calories, and fat intake contributes the most energy that will be distributed to the fetus through the placenta, especially in the final or the last trimester of pregnancy. And for the mother with high consumption of saturated fat during pregnancy, increase the occurrence babies born whose weight or length is not as it should be. For the third one is about proteins. This is also the macronutrients. Proteins function in the cell formation and body development. It's very important. And during pregnancy, this is increased. For the protein course, around 40%, represented by fetus, amniotic fluid, and placenta. And the remaining 60% for adipose tissue, breast tissues, the uterus, and increased blood volume. And the total addition of protein here is about 600 until 900 grams. But this is increased until the last trimester, or the trimester. And IOM recommended for the protein, protein consumption for pregnant women to support growth and fetal growth and development. This about 0.8 gram per kilograms, but weight per day. And this is in the first trimester. Then heightly are increased until 1.1 gram per kilogram body weight per day. And also, as we know here, the protein divides to types, from the animal and vegetable protein. So we call this nabati and hewani in Indonesia. Animal protein sources, we call this complete protein because they provide all 9 amino acids, while vegetable source protein sources are called incomplete protein because they do not have the protein needed by the body in the body, such as lysine or threonine. And what's happened if someone got the deficiency? Protein deficiency can cause neurological damage, anemia, stunted or stunting, we call this, stunted fetal growth, decreased maternal weight, kidney dysfunction, heart failure, and oxidative stress. Okay. Now we call this the fiber. Here, fiber is one of nutrient in the body needs. But the fiber cannot digested by the digestive tract, but rather dissolved in the water and helps in both movements. And fiber is beneficial for pregnant women. During pregnancy, the hormone progesterone increase. It's cause heartburn, constipation, and digestive disorder. Through the metabolism of short change fatty acid, consumption of fiber during pregnancy affect lung development, immune regulation, and inflammation due to allergy. And also, fiber consumption can reduce the risk of celiac disease. Now, fiber consists of 2 types, soluble fiber and insoluble fiber. What is the soluble or insoluble fiber? Soluble fiber absorb water, aids in stomach emptying into fatty acids, and slow sugar absorption. Another is insoluble fiber, enters the digestive tract unchanged and helps balance of pH in the digestive tract. So, what's the recommended to consume the fiber? As long as during pregnancy, we recommended to consume the fiber. It's about approximately 25 until 35 grams per day. This is for the pregnant women. And here, this is the macro and vitamin nutrients. Is iron. We call this iron. Iron is very important things. The needs nutrients during pregnancy increase twofold because the blood volume increase. So every gram of hemoglobin requires 3.64 elements of iron. So the fetus also needs iron for metabolism and during delivery. Iron deficiency can cause anemia, fatigue, difficulty sleeping, and even fainting. So we the recommended iron intake during pregnancy is around 27 milligram per day. How about vitamin A? This is the iron, and another nutrients is vitamin A. Vitamin A is beneficial to pregnant women.
Start video, belum lagi ya. Take my photo sih.
Helps to maintain the mother's night vision.
Wait, take me first ya.
The development of other
Video
organs.
tutup. Kejap lagi nak buka video.
The fetal skeleton.
Kan kita nampak kan ni.
And the fetal immune system.
Okay.
What's the recommended for vitamin A? This is about the pregnant woman, yeah, for consume or recommended vitamin A consume increase, yeah, by about until 10 to 20%, yeah. So this is about the doses, yeah, is 800 grams per day. And another is vitamin D. Deficiency of vitamin D in pregnant women also can cause adverse obstetric outcomes such as maternal osteomalacia, gestational diabetes, preeclampsia, and primary cesarean section. Vitamin D requirements during pregnancy is about 15 microgram. And another is about vitamin C. Yeah, vitamin C. Vitamin C, here we know that vitamin C can reduce the risk of premature rupture of membranes, or we call this PROM. And is vitamin C here requirement, yeah, during pregnancy is about 85 microgram. Sorry. The last, this is for the macronutrients, yeah, calcium and vitamin B9, yeah, or we call this folic acid. For calcium, we know that calcium function to maintain the mother calcium balance and bone density, and also support fetal development. That calcium deficiency can interfere, yeah, with fetal growth and LBV, yeah, low birth weight. So here we WHO recommends calcium supplementation is about 1.5 until 2 grams per day. How about the vitamin B9 or folic acid? Folic acid is increased during pregnancy. We call this for development of tissue in placenta and uterus, and also fetal growth. Folic acid requirement during pregnancy is about 600 microgram. So this is about the dehydration. Yeah, dehydration. As we know, water is needed to maintain the hydration status during pregnancy. And also, in addition, the increased need for water is useful for supporting the processes of fetal circulation, blood volume, and amniotic fluid. Yeah. And another function for water is to maintain the body temperature, helps the absorption of nutrients and oxygen, and acts as a solvent for vitamin and also mineral and amino acid. Then also water can obtain through drinks, water, tea, soft drinks, soap, and water content in food. So what's the water needs in a pregnancy? Water requirement for pregnant women here, as we know here, dehydration is in pregnancy. In pregnancy can cause lack of amniotic fluid, which causes oligohydramnios. Oligohydramnios affect pregnancy outcomes and fetal health. Oligohydramnios is one of the main factors of cesarean section. Yeah. And from the IOM, or Institute of Medicine, recommended the pregnant women should be consume for 3 liters or 3,000 milliliters of water per day for the pregnant woman. And here we can see about the nutrition status and weight gain. If we know the pregnant women in the good or normal from the nutrition status is from the weight gain. For every trimester, they should be increased. Yeah. Weight gain during pregnancy is a sign of health and nutritional status of mother and fetus. Here we can see from the body mass index, or BMI before pregnancy, determine of mother weight gains. A high BMI means that the weight gain is lower than normal. Yeah. In the first trimester of pregnancy, the increase in the body weight tends to be small, but in the second and third trimester, the mother's weight continues to increase. In addition, here divide into two, namely one expansion of maternal tissues, and increase in the mass of uterine tissues and mother's milk, and increase in blood volume, fat storage, extracellular foods, and several other tissues network expansion accounts for 2/3 of total weight addition. Yeah, this is the table for the recommendation for weight to increase based on BMI. Weight category for the underweight, normal, overweight, obesity. If someone in the normal BMI, the recommended of total increase for weight is about here 11 until 15. So also here recommended increase for second trimester to third trimester or the last trimester per week is about 0.4 kilogram. Okay, so mothers who were overweight or obese before pregnancy have an increased risk of preeclampsia, gestational diabetes, and miscarriage in early pregnancy. Mothers whose BMI is in the underweight category at risk of giving birth to premature babies are at double the risk of giving birth to low weight babies and are malnourished in childhood. Call this in stunting and wasting. So we should control for the BMI before pregnancy, and we call this pre-pregnancy weight, body weight, and also as long as during pregnancy we control from the weight gain. So this is the recommended for the weight. Okay, I think this is our topic or material that we share for our student or all the audience here. Thank you very much.
You are welcome, Ibu. You are welcome, Ibu. Very, very interesting sharing. Before the second speaker, Associate Prof. Mariama or Associate Prof. Mary to join and sharing, we will go to the refreshing first with the song by video by Indah Gumilang is the.
Yes. Thank you very much.
Sama. Abi letih daripada kelas ke daripada makmal.
Yeah, from the hospital.
Hospital, right?
Daripada hospital.
Okay. Wah, nice.
Wait, I'm just going to see if that's okay. Can you all see, please?
It's very nice with the red shirt, t-shirt.
Yes, bright colors are all cheerful colors, motivation.
Yeah.
Motivating colors, all the bright colors are motivating. So I love to use motivating colors.
Like your t-shirt right now, it's very nice.
Yeah, today is light purple. Took a light color only when we go to the wards. Okay,
Yeah,
thank you very much, Prof. Sharul.
sama-sama.
Okay, and then how many participants do we have today?
27 ini campur ada lecturers, ada students, ada juga participant.
Oh, okay. Okay, Tanya, Prof. Sharul nak tanya, student tu adakah mereka bachelors atau diploma atau masters?
Mereka bachelors yang kebanyakan, tapi masih semester 6, semester 5 macam itu. Okay,
mesti kuat kuat dalam knowledge mereka, tak ada masalah. Kita akan berbincang secara intellectual lah. Okay, again, good afternoon to all the professors, doctors, and participants. Very pleased to meet you all on this platform. I'm representing Masa University as a adjunct professor and also a senior lecturer. Mariama Maslamani have been working very long with the government and also the private universities. And also I'm a lecturer with Monash University teaching the medical students. Okay, I'd like to share my vast experiences working for the past 40 years in the nursing and midwifery field. So feel free to ask any question related to my field, and you can keep all the questions at the end of the session or just put it in the chat box and we'll discuss later. All right, I would like to talk a lot about our Malaysia context. Mereka faham bahasa Inggeris dengan baik ke atau kemudian mahu cakap dalam bahasa Melayu?
Bagus, cakap Malay dicampur lebih baik.
Campur, okey. Katakan mereka tak faham, mereka boleh simpan soalan-soalan tersebut, tak ada masalah. Okey, saya continue. Izinkan saya. Okay, the highlight for today, we will be discussing on the midwife's critical role in improving maternal and child health care. So, other than that, I would be talking about the overview of high-risk pregnancies, followed by impact of high-risk pregnancy on woman, fetus, or the baby. Next, very important agenda is empowering midwives in managing high-risk pregnancies. Here, I would be discussing on identifying the high-risk patient or pregnant woman. Next, how we do the tagging for patient using the color coding. Next, referring the high-risk patient for prompt treatment and management. This is to reduce morbidity, mortality to the pregnant woman and also the fetus and the baby. And finally, we'll be discussing on managing high-risk patient collaboratively with the medical officers, family medicine specialists, obstetrician, pharmacists, dietitian, and others. So this is the main component we are going to talk about in this platform, because this is talking about empowerment of the midwives, okay? All right, the introduction is a very important aspect. So I like to start my day by saying only the strongest women become midwife because they are decision makers and they bring a new life into the world, retaining the life of a mother. So they're taking charge of two lives, the mother and the baby. Okay, this one, I'd like to discuss on intellectuality of midwives. WHO in 2022, it stated that midwives who are educated to international standards provide good family planning services. And when women receive good family planning services, we could bring down 80% of all maternal deaths, stillbirth, and also neonatal death. This is achieved when the midwives are licensed, regulated, fully integrated into the healthcare system, and who work in interprofessional team. So they have the knowledge, they have got the power, they've got the skill, and they integrate into their daily practice to control this maternal mortality and also neonatal deaths. Okay, WHO 2022 also state that midwives are unique people, able to provide services to women and newborn, even in the most difficult, tragic, and conflict affected setting. Example, now we are just coming out of COVID-19. So you know that the nurses, midwives, and all the medics and the paramedics work so hard, you know, to bring the disease to a control. So other than that, midwives not only manage this COVID to control the COVID, and also they were at the same time taking charge of the pregnant woman, the fetus, the baby, and the growing child. Okay. They also they're also involved in the floods, national disasters, the wars, you know, the Ukraine war. So whether there is difficult time or not, whether easy time, difficult time, they are always there to bring in a new life into the world. So midwives are always very popular, and their work is everlasting. They make a significant contribution to the delivery and achievement of the WHO strategies. Okay, WHO strategy, we have got a lot of strategy, but primarily we are looking into, excuse me, Sustainable Development Goal. We have got 17 Sustainable Development Goal, okay, following the Millennium Development Goal. Okay, we have completed that, we were successful, and now we are looking at we are implementing the Sustainable Development Goal, and primarily we are looking into Goal 3 and Goal 5. Goal 3 is good health and well-being, and Goal 5 is gender equality. Goal 3 is good health and well-being, not only to the pregnant woman, birthing woman, preparing woman, but the whole family, the child, the spouse of the family, and other people who are living with them. I would say is the global population. As for the gender equality, okay, what it says is achieve gender equality and empower all women and girls. Okay, we can see that certain countries, they empower the woman more than any other country, but sometimes the developing country and the developing country has got some limitation into empowering women. However, in the midwifery field, we are really grateful, and we owe our gratitude that we are empowered to educate the women, okay, to empower themselves with regard, example, this gender equality. The woman has the right whether to get married or not, whether to get pregnant or not, whether to carry the child, whether to terminate the child. That depends on the country's policy. All right, and then we are of help to them on how we are going to execute the plans with regard to the gender equality. Okay, that's part of it. So Sustainable Development Goal 5 states that we are empowering all women and girls to achieve the gender equality. So you want to talk about this, we can talk about it at the end of the session. Okay, our participant can keep the question. It's a very nice topic regarding gender equality. We can talk about gender equality at home, at workplace, with our colleagues, you know, and other things. All right, these are the Malaysian midwives. Okay, I think Malaysian midwives and Indonesian got some similarity because we more or less talk the same language. We also have lots of Indonesian patients. We really enjoy the patient. Okay, a little bit of Indonesian accent, but more or less we have got the same culture and other things. So I'm sure the Indonesian midwives are similar, okay, to our Malaysians. All right. WHO also spoke about investing in midwifery. So investing in nurse and midwifery is actually a good value for money. The report of the United Nations High-Level Commission on Health, Employment and Economic Growth concluded that investing in education for the midwife and job creation, okay, in health and social sectors result in triple return of improved health outcomes, global health security, and inclusive economic growth. So when the nation are healthy, we deliver safe, the woman delivers safely, so the economic grows well. Why am I talking so much about education and all about midwife? Because midwife are the key to the success of the country's growth population. If they are not key, how can we bring new life into the country and bring about increase in the population? And that is what I mean here. Okay, other than that, with regard to midwifery education, WHO again states that educating midwife to international standard is a cost-effective investment. Okay, and then other than that, it saves resources by reducing costly and unnecessary intervention. Other than that, it is also surprisingly, it is a surprise that we have got lack of investment. We have got lack of investment in quality midwifery education despite the evidence of impact. So it's time to take collective action globally. Okay, this is what they say. They have to siphon a lot of money, not only for the other profession education, but the nurse education is very, very important because that is the health of the country, and the nurses and the midwives are the backbone of the country. All right. Okay, this is the advancement in midwifery education in Malaysia. Once upon a time, we only had certificate in nursing. I would also like to say congratulations to Indonesia because you have also a very great advancement in your nursing and midwifery profession. And I'm very proud that you have collaborated with our Masa University because, as we say, we are sisters, siblings. We share the common interest of developing nurses of the future who are very intellectual. Okay, we have upgraded ourselves right from basic. This is with regard to midwifery. From the basic certificate nursing course to diploma in nursing. That's about nursing. And also we have gone to Bachelor of Science Nursing. Okay, as with regard to midwifery, we have gone further. From a certificate in midwifery, we have gone into advanced diploma in midwifery. Last time it was only 6 months. Now it's a 1-year course. And then we also have a Bachelor of Nursing Sciences Midwifery. We have got Masters of Nursing Sciences Midwifery, and we have got a standalone program that is Masters of Midwifery, and we have got PhD in Nursing in bracket midwifery, and also we have got PhD in midwifery. So all these programs are run in Malaysia, and different universities run this program. So I think we have gone very far in our midwifery, and lots of our nurses and midwives are, excuse me, are very marketable, not only in the, not only in Arab Saudi, but also in Australia, Canada, and now widely taken by Singapore. Okay, now I'd like to talk about this education. Education brings about critical thinking midwives. So they're able to problem solve. Okay, when there's a problem, they can think carefully and then they can solve the problem. So it is a real, success when we give them intellectual education. This brings about success. How can we see results? We can only see results when we are working with them in the clinical area. Example, I'm working in the labor room. I've been in the service for the past 40 years and I've trained lots of midwives, the staff nurses who are working in the same unit with me now. I'm training the doctors now and they are working there and they work so efficiently and they're able to do lots of good decision making and their results are good, outcome is good. Okay, so good decision making means, okay, they're able to apply the theory through remembering, understanding, and they're able to analyze, evaluate, and problem solve, and then create scenarios which are having good outcomes. But these are the empowered and autonomous midwives of Malaysia, very friendly people, and our delivery rate is very high. Though our population don't seem to be growing very high, 32 million, but our delivery rate, like my hospital, we have between 40 to 50 deliveries per day. And I call it a baby factory, but we really enjoy it. Okay, overview of high-risk pregnancy. As we know, what is high-risk pregnancy? It's actually a pregnancy, okay, that that carries risk to the pregnant woman, fetus, or baby. So in this place, women need extra care before, during, and after birth. This is to reduce the complications to the mother and the fetus. Okay, that does not mean that all women will face a risk during the birth. That high-risk pregnancy, when it's detected early, the patient would be referred early to the appropriate authority and then treated, managed, and they can go into normal birth and deliver a normal baby. So many women experience healthy pregnancies and labor, okay, and delivery, or at least the happy moment. Okay, that does not mean that high risk pregnancy is always at risk. Okay. Okay, prevalence of high risk pregnancy worldwide it is 10 to 30% and estimated to be at risk. So there was a cross-sectional study conducted in a referral hospital in Kelantan. We used the color coding system, color coding antenatal stratified system. So what happened here was, we found that high-risk pregnancy was 11.4%. However, there was another retrospective cohort study, okay, which was done in the clinics of Selangor, and they reported a high-risk pregnancy to be 28%. We would be wondering, you know, why is it so high? We are a developing country. Why is it so high? However, what happened here is it depends on the type of healthcare services provided to the patient then. Okay, we find this type of figures, we will go into troubleshooting to reduce the figures, which we are doing. Okay, factors that can contribute to high-risk pregnancy, primarily is age, okay. One is if the mother is below 18 years, if mother is below 18 years old and below, is high risk, or above 35 years old and or above 35 years old. 18 years and below, they are called as teenage pregnancies, okay, and they contribute to quite a large number of pregnancies in Malaysia now. What happened here is these mothers are single marital status. We label them as ibu tanpa nikah. Why we label it on the antenatal card? It is because they come to us very late. So when they come to us, they carry complication for them, and the baby which is going to be delivered would have complication. So we label them so that we can give them special care after when they are admitted. As for the mothers who are 35 years and above, as you know, non-communicable disease is on the rise globally, and women come to us with age-related diseases such as hypertension, diabetes mellitus, and others, which contribute or convert into hypertensive disorder in pregnancy and also gestational diabetes mellitus. So all this will cause a complication. And other lifestyles such as smoking, alcoholism, and substance use. The increased sexual behavior can bring about STI. And also another big problem is obesity. Overweight obesity, as our Dr. Susi was talking about it, yes, okay, is a big problem. And people like to grow pets at home, and then they can get infections such as toxoplasmosis and other things. All right, so these are the risk factors. Okay, this is the statistics of teenage pregnancy in Malaysia in the year of 2014 to 2018. Okay, in 2018, we had 2,873 teenage pregnancies, okay? And now it's still on the rise. When I go into the labor room, I don't know what's the statistics, I couldn't get it. Every other mother is a single marital status whereby they need lot of help, lot of counseling, lot of support. That's why they teach our nurses and medical students and also the doctors to help them as much as possible. All right. The risk here will be with regard to teenage pregnancy is, first of all, their education would be interrupted, and then they've got maternal morbidity and mortality. Why they have this is because they are not attended to during the antenatal care. They don't come to us, so there is a risk of anemia. Anemia contribute to postpartum hemorrhage and its complication. So it could lead to morbidity or mortality. And also anemia contribute to preterm labor, preterm babies, and its complication. And if not in time, they will have stillbirth. All right, these are the other complications that they could have during pregnancy. Hypertensive disorder in pregnancy. So though they are taken care well here at the antenatal clinic, but they may come with pre-existing hypertension, which may convert into hypertensive disorder in pregnancy and its complication. But we've got a very good system of monitoring, capturing them early and managing them early. All right, what did the national figures show? The NHMS reported prevalence of hypertensive disorder in Malaysia. Okay, what he reported is state that it had 30% okay, in 2019, in the Malaysian population that increased with age, as I told you, it's age-related disease, 0.4% among women aged 20 to 24, and 19.9% among women aged 40 to 44 years. Okay, from pre-existing hypertension, or we call that as essential hypertension, it converts into pregnancy-induced hypertension in pregnancy, and further it can go into complicate with other clinical manifestation. It goes into pre-eclampsia, okay, from hypertension. It includes into the hypertension, protein, and edema. So what happened here? From preeclampsia, it states as mild, moderate, and severe. From preeclampsia, it can convert into impending eclampsia. That's a complication, and mother can go into eclamptic fit and HELLP syndrome. So this can bring about morbidity and mortality. So this is another risk factor lah. So as for another problem is gestational diabetes. Okay, we can see it is 3/4 of people with diabetes worldwide live in low and middle income countries, and then it affects 1 in 7 birth. Gestational diabetes mellitus. Okay, you can ask me what is the contributing factor? Mothers, we are all very, I think the Southeast Asian countries have become quite rich. You can see every other ladies, women are overweight, obese, as what Dr. Susi was telling about the BMI, okay, overweight, obesity, and they may be having essential diabetes, which may convert into essential diabetes and its complication. So 1 in 7, and how they could prevent this gestational diabetes prior to pregnancy is, okay, early detection, and then monitor blood sugar regularly, adopt a healthier lifestyle before going into pregnancy with ideal, okay, BMI. Okay, there was a study, prevalent, not a study, a systematic review. Okay. A systematic review. I want to push this down actually because blocking this one. Prevalence of GDM in Malaysia. So there was a systematic review done by Cheong et al. And they found that in all their studies, they found that in year 2021, there was 21.5% of gestational diabetes mellitus, which is quite high, okay? And then obesity in pregnancy, okay, this is from Public Health England. They say 50% of all childbearing women, okay, are overweight or obese. 19% are in the reproductive age, and 3.6% of these women are severely obese. Okay, this classification has been stated by Dr. Susi just now. I'm not going to talk about it again. All right, and then you see, it is a shame to announce that Malaysia has got the highest, okay, population of obese people, 44 in Southeast Asia. No, 44.2% are obese in Malaysia. However, Indonesia only state 21%. Very surprising. You all very, very thin, kurus-kurus, cantik-cantik. We are obese here. Okay. Okay. At the same time, you see, these particular obese mothers, just now obese patient, 50% are women. And out of that 50%, 15% would go into pregnancy with overweight. Just imagine. And this is where they go into gestational diabetes and its complication. When they have gestational diabetes, sometimes it complicates hand in hand. Macam dua serangkai. They have hypertensive disorder in pregnancy and they have complication. So this is where we have to be very careful in identifying, referring, treating them, managing them so that we can bring them as normal as possible to prevent morbidity, mortality to the mother and also the fetus or the baby. So other factors are obstetric. We obtain obstetric history to identify their risk. What is the recurrent? What is this? Okay. Recurrent miscarriage, intrauterine death, abnormal babies, neonatal death, history of bleeding, and then instrumental delivery. Baby is big. I just delivered, no, we just delivered just now one baby. Mother is underweight, below 18 BMI, but baby was 3.88. We had so much of difficulty to pull the baby out, and we were checking the physical examination. Lucky thing, no trauma, but we have admitted the baby. All right, so polyspaced pregnancy, ABO incompatibility, small baby, grand multipara, preterm delivery, okay, previous history of retained placenta, and third and fourth degree perineal test. So all these are risk factors. And surgical history may show cesarean section, uterine surgery, pelvic surgery, bowel surgery, transplant, abdominal surgery can be a risk factor. Family history of marrying close relative cousins, okay, genetic disorder or congenital structural abnormalities can be a high risk in pregnancy. Okay, social history, okay, this one we must really be very, very careful. Domestic violence. The mothers may not tell us that they're having domestic violence at home. We have to identify and refer them appropriately. Stress at work can cause high-risk pregnancy, stress in relationship, occupational hazard, low social income, marginalized group, and also single mother, as I spoke just now. Okay, effects of high-risk pregnancy, it can cause birth defects, okay, in the fetus, fetal growth restriction, GDM, multiple gestation, preeclampsia, and its complication, preterm birth, postpartum hemorrhage, okay. And then the clinical manifestation, there are lots of this. I've just typed part of it, palpitation, this is all anemia. Part of it are anemia, and part of it are other problems, clinical manifestation. So mom may complain of palpitation, breathlessness, chest pain, dizziness, frequent fainting attack, reduced fetal movement, high fever, hyperemesis gravidarum, frontal occipital headache, edema of the legs or generalized vaginal bleeding. Many other signs and symptoms, but we have to identify what is the problem and what are the diagnoses and for treatment purpose. So the investigation and diagnosis for the high-risk pregnancy would be blood and urine testing to check for genetic problems, okay, any birth problem, ultrasonography to screen for congenital defect, fetal growth and well-being. Monitoring to ensure the fetus is getting enough supply, okay, so we do biophysical profile. These monitors actually, their breathing, movement, amniotic fluid index. Other than that, okay, other than that, we also do a cardiotocography. Hello?
4 minutes more.
Hey, yes, sir. Okay, all these lab investigations are also done. Okay. We do series of ultrasonography, we do cardiotocography, and also we do a physical examination. Management, we do collaborative management between the midwife, medical officers, family medicine specialists, dietitian, and laboratory technician. They go on frequent follow-up, consultation with the maternal fetal medicine specialist. Other than that, with physician, we do serial ultrasonography. We monitor blood sugar, fetal movement at home. We give the autonomy to the mother. So this is how we manage. We also have got this perinatal guideline by Ministry of Health Malaysia to empower the midwife to work collaboratively with the doctors and the other healthcare team. So we not only manage the patients in the health clinic, but also in the hospital. So interprofessional collaboration. Our guidelines, we have pre-pregnancy care guideline, antenatal, intrapartum, postpartum, and neonatal guideline. Within that particular book, okay, we have got a lot of guidelines in Malaysia whereby we can follow. So our tagline, every mother has the right to expect her baby to be born alive and healthy, just as every baby has the right to be living with a healthy mother. So this is the process flow chart. If the mother is well, all managed by midwife. If the mother is abnormal, then managed by the medical officer. So the autonomy is given. So this is the pregnancy management. We empower the midwives. Okay, here the booking is all done by the midwife. The color coding is also, so this is the antenatal visit done, monitored by the midwife. And then booking visit should be below 12. Okay, if they come late, also still we consider as booking. Okay, and then comprehensive history taking, and we use this antenatal rate card. This is okay empowerment given to the midwives to monitor this rate card and to do the color coding and to refer the cases to the doctor, specialists and others. So these are the history to be taken by the midwives. So lots of empowerment given to the midwives, and medication can be supplied by the midwives. So this is the color coding done by the midwife. White means no risk, green is low risk, yellow is moderate risk, and red is high risk. Okay, so management and subsequent visits, they do the same investigation, and if there is a need to add on investigation, they will do it also. Okay, and then antenatal classes are also managed by the midwife with lots of guidance given on care during antenatal, labor, puerperium. Okay, so home visits also done by the midwives. They attend to new cases, priority cases, high-risk cases, defaulted cases, follow-up cases. So lots of empowerment given to them. So they also do the antepartum fetal monitoring collaboratively. The growth, fetal growth is done by the doctors through ultrasonography. Fetal movement is done with fetal kick chart at home. They empower the woman. Woman empowering woman. The midwife empower the woman, the pregnant woman to do it. We also, the midwives are also empowered to give iron magnesium sulfate to severe hypertensive disorder, in pregnancy cases. So the flow, how to give is shown. Midwives are also empowered to give dexamethasone to preterm labor to maturize the fetal lung for delivery. All right, then we also identify any previous risk in labor so that we can anticipate appropriately. In the delivery suite, okay, we have collaborative management with the doctors and other team, okay, to deliver the baby. Pitocin induction augmentation is done by the midwife, ordered by the doctor, and we do it so well. Okay, this is empowerment again, autonomy given. Photograph monitoring is also done by the midwives in the labor room, and we detect any abnormality, refer to doctor for obstetrical change of obstetrical management. CTG is also done by midwives, and also we identify the abnormal CTG and we review and plan another, if there's needed, another obstetrical management, whether SVD or cesarean section. So collaborative labor management is very important in our labor room. We also manage obstetrical emergencies. When the doctors are not around there, the midwife would manage. For example, shoulder dystocia, we set the red alert, and once the doctor come over, they take over, and we just follow instruction and do it together. Okay, cord prolapse, we manage. Impending eclampsia and fits, okay, managed by the midwife. So lots of empowerment and autonomy given. PPH is also managed by the midwives in the team with good outcomes. So key is partnership and collaborative management by the midwife, doctors, and the team. All right, then postnatal care is also done by the midwife. This is a garis panduan perawatan ibu postnatal di hospital dan juga di rumah by the government. Okay, give me another 1 minute, I'll finish up. So this is another management done by the midwife, giving heparin to high-risk cases to reduce the risk of deep vein thrombosis during the puerperium. Okay, so this garis panduan all is in place, and we follow the garis panduan. Okay, I've gone through very fast because the time was so limited. Okay, thank you very much. I open to questions.
Okay. Tampaklah senior lecturer of Masa and apa satu itu dari Australia ya, University Monash. Memang tampaklah Associate Prof Mari ini the famous lecturers ini ya. Mantap.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Because I'm working in the hospital.
Ya, macam memang you kawannya Prof Zahra. Pandai-pandai lah semuanya dalam.
Itu idola saya, Prof Zahra idola saya.
Prof Tian kawannya.
Ya, betul.
Oke, kita tadi Puan bagi tahu tentang big baby kan, more 4 kilogram kan. For your information, my last baby bongsu female itu lahir 4,8 Dia kena kesar sebelumnya normal sahaja. Rupanya macam Prof kata tadi big placenta in her mom. Di apa-apa yang ibunya makan terus diambil oleh dia. Itu my bungsu tu. Jadi memang saya pun ada experience perkara ini. Okay, before we go to question answer, we have the new friend from Batam, University Nagoya, Indonesia. We hope Associate Prof Mary dan Ibu Eri will be to come there because there is Dr. Susi is the rector of University Nagoya Batam. He's yeah, this is the new university. Tapi sebelumnya dia adalah apa namanya kuliah universiti saja ataupun dia punya academy, tapi dia sudah joinkan semua menjadi universiti baru namanya University Nagoya Indonesia Batam. Therefore, we hope we can to invite you there and then go to Singapore with ferry from Batam.
Can, no problem. Come, please. You're most welcome. Please come.
Okay, Ibu.
We will have a good educational and social trip. Good.
We hope the lecturer from University Nagoya Indonesia and from Esa Unggul Ibu Eri will be to continue study PhD in your university, right?
Alright.
Jadi ibu-ibu nanti boleh ambil master ataupun PhD. Tadi Puan Mari sudah memberitahu program-program yang ada di MAHTA apapun di Mono.
Yes, betul.
Tingkat master maupun PhD. Okay, before we go to question answers, kita pergi dengar dulu dari University Nagoya Indonesia. Mau ikut sharing sedikit banyak Ibu Eri. Nanti selepas itu baru saya baca pertanyaan yang ada di email sekarang ini. Ibu Susi, siapa ini Mbak Aini yang mau sharing? Silakan. Mungkin dalam 15 menit ya. Oke, sila.
Mohon maaf Pak, share screen-nya tidak bisa Pak.
Oh boleh, kita bagikan Ibu sebagai co-host.
Oke, sudah Pak, sudah.
Kita berikan. Yang penting untuk melahirkan yang baik, bapak-bapaknya harus ada di sebelahnya. Ya Ibu.
Jauh sangat bapak-bapaknya.
Bapaknya jangan lari pokoknya. Kalau lari nanti apa yang bayarkan hospital. Oke. Sudah kelihatan Ibu sekarang ini sedang pusing-pusing. Macam internetnya agak kurang kenceng.
Laptopnya Pak, agak lola sedikit Pak.
Oh, ya. Belum berjaya lagi. Atau mau disiapkan dulu, saya baca pertanyaan untuk dua speaker dulu sambil menyiapkan itu.
Boleh Pak.
Boleh. Okay, right now we go to question pada Ibu Eri dulu. Ibu Eri, boleh dengar suara ya? Saya nak baca nih.
Iya.
Ibu Eri. Okay. Sekarang pertanyaannya saya ambil dua orang saja karena masa kita terhad. Dari Putri. Sangat menarik tadi sharing Ibu Eri sampaikan, very interesting sharing about dehydration and pregnancy. Usually, ini pakai bahasa Inggris macam itu. Usually not everybody understand is it mom everything okay regard how many millimeters water must be to drink. Some of mom get overheating. What the phenomenon we know that mom dehydration and must be to drink water more until of a few volume. Dia tanya ni, tak tahulah apa ibu ini kurang air atau macam mana. Bagaimana nak tahu dia itu kurang air atau dehydration? Apa tanda-tanda? Kira-kira macam itulah kata bahasa Melayu. Okay, nombor 2 dari Aini. Regarding apa ini dikata ya? Okay. Regarding nutrition, how we know that protein for baby enough before pregnant, before apa ini ya? Ini maksud dia itu before melahirkan ya. Jadi ini dia bilang before pregnancy, before give birth maksudnya ini. What the best composition of meal a mom must be to consumption to become of baby best condition before give birth. How about of mom? How about if mom problem regard his mood, mean not mood to eat. Itu pertanyaan untuk Ibu Eri. And then pertanyaan untuk asisten Prof Mary dari Sari ini. Very interesting sharing, Prof. We get many knowledge from you today. Okay. Dia tanya in English yang satu. Usually a new mom who first time give birth more worry and hope successful. What the family of new mom must be best prepared before give birth. Nah, itu dia tanya bahasa Inggris lah. Ini yang nomor 2 dari Dewi, guna bahasa Indonesia. Apakah makanan yang bagus untuk dikonsumsi semasa kehamilan? Adakah pantangan obat dan makanan tertentu yang perlu dihindarkan? Apa sahaja aktiviti yang bagus untuk melancarkan masa melahirkan? Itu masing-masing saya baca 2 pertanyaan, dimulai dari Ibu Eri dulu, setelah itu baru asosiat Prof Mary sebagai second speaker. Oke, silakan Bu Mary dalam masa 5 menit boleh jawab 2 pertanyaan ya.
Baik, thank you very much, Prof. Reza. Yeah, this is the good questions ya about the apa namanya tanda-tanda tadi, tanda-tanda dehidrasi ya, Prof ya.
Yes.
Ya. Yeah. Maybe I will answer in 2 bahasa ya. So ada memang beberapa tanda-tanda yang bisa kita lihat ya kalau seseorang itu menderita dehidrasi ya. From the first, we can see from the urine color ya, urine color. The degradation from the color is to very agak kereng ya. Jadi warnanya tuh kuningnya agak lebih melekat. Nah biasanya kita ada beside the urine color, we can deliver to laboratory test ya. This is we have two indicator or biomarker indicators ya. The first, the osmolality urine osmolality, and the second one is urine specific gravity, or we call this berat jenis urin. Jadi standar ada gold standard yang biasa digunakan untuk melihat apakah seseorang itu menderita dehidrasi di masa kehamilan atau tidak. Jadi kebetulan ini merupakan hasil studi atau hasil riset saya di tahun 2016 ya, saya lakukan terkait dengan dehidrasi kehamilan sampai dengan 2021. Yang pertama itu adalah terkait dengan kita bisa mendetek itu dari warna urin. Jadi itu adalah cara yang sederhana yang digunakan untuk mengetes apakah seseorang mengalami dehidrasi atau tidak. Kemudian biasanya kita merujuk subjek atau ibu hamil tersebut ke puskesmas untuk melakukan pemeriksaan atau ke laboratorium di puskesmas atau laboratorium privat ya yang lain untuk bisa melakukan tes lebih spesifik, yaitu untuk melihat osmolitas urin atau dan di sini juga berat jenis urin. Nah itu tiga biomarker yang biasa digunakan atau menjadi gold standard. Lainnya dari hasil riset yang saya lakukan itu bisa lagi lebih mendalam, yaitu menggunakan osmolitas serum. dan natrium serum. Jadi kalau sudah sampai ke tahapan dia mengalami dehidrasi berat, baru biasanya akan terlihat rendahnya kadar natrium pada darah, ya, serum darah seperti itu. Jadi itu adalah hasil beberapa riset, ya, dan telah kita lakukan dari tahun 2016 sampai 2021, ya, untuk mendalami tentang dehidrasi ini, tentang hidrasi pada kehamilan. Seperti itu. Dan yang dianjurkan untuk mengatasi itu, makanya IOM sendiri menganjurkan 3.000 mili atau 3 liter per hari. Itu bisa mencakup, bisa mengcover, ya. Karena biasanya umumnya kan kalau ibu-ibu hamil itu di last trimester, ya, atau di trimester ketiga itu jarang minum, ya, karena posisi bayi sudah menekan ke bawah. Biasanya ibu-ibu ini suka menahan justru karena malas buang air kecil terus gitu kan, bolak-balik kamar mandi seperti itu. Nah, biasanya di situ yang banyaknya case atau kasus kejadian ibu itu mengalami dehidrasi. Makanya banyak yang mengalami prematur atau mengalami apa namanya infeksi saluran kemih gitu, ya, dan bahkan juga ada preeklamsia dan lain sebagainya. Itu case-case itu sudah dari beberapa riset. Nah, dalam satu waktu untuk menilai itu semua, ya, biasanya kenaikan suhu tubuh kita. Jadi kita bisa merasakan kalau kita kurang air, ya. Jadi sebenarnya gini, ada 2 indikator. Kita sebut ada namanya dehidrasi. Dehidrasi adalah dia kekurangan air. Tapi kalau kita sebut sampai kepada tahapan hipohidrasi, maka sudah sampai ke tahapan dia kekurangan natrium tadi. Seperti itu. Jadi sudah sampai natriumnya itu sudah hilang dari tubuhnya. Karenanya biasanya orang yang mengalami dehidrasi, ada yang kita sebut dia bisa kembali ke dalam normal, ya. Dia mengalami rehidrasi, berarti dia sudah bisa mengembalikan status hidrasinya dia. Biasanya itu dalam waktu 2 hari, ya. Itu seseorang bisa 1 hari ini dia kurang minum, kemudian di hari berikutnya dia bisa nyusul ketinggalannya. Tapi ada yang ketika dia dalam kurun waktu trimester 1 sampai dengan trimester ketiga ini dia mengalami dehidrasi. Nah, hasil riset saya di tahun 2018 itu menunjukkan bahwa ada perbedaan ibu yang mengalami dehidrasi tetap, artinya dari trimester 1 sampai trimester ketiga dia mengalami dehidrasi, berat dan panjang badan bayinya itu mengalami prematur, ya, atau kekurangan. Jadi jarak itu kurang lebih sekitar 500 gram.
Oke.
Ya, seperti itu. Kalau untuk pertanyaan yang kedua tadi terkait dengan protein, ya. Protein itu tadi dikatakan protein itu kebutuhannya, ya, sesuai dengan apa namanya, kan kita tahu di awal trimester dia sudah mulai ada pembentukan dan fisiologi C-nya itu kan sudah sel-sel, ya. Dia sudah mulai terbentuk sehingga kebutuhannya semakin meningkat. Nah, idealnya normal itu sekitar 0,8 tadi, ya, disebutkan di paper di slide saya, tapi nanti akan ada pertambahan trimester 1, kemudian trimester kedua sampai dengan trimester ketiga. Itu akan ada pertambahan untuk bisa memenuhi asupan sampai dengan trimester ketiga. Itu sampai dengan 1,1 tadi. Itu sudah ada di slide tadi, Pak.
Baik.
Seperti itu.
Terima kasih, Bu Eri. Jadi dehidrasi dapat diketahui dengan melihat kurang atau lebihnya apa yang saya sampaikan tadi, termasuk kadar urin. Kalau Kang Indah bilang kalau untuk orang lelaki, Bu, kelihatan urinnya itu dehidrasi apa enggak tergantung, bukan kurang itu tapi kurang duit apa enggak, katanya gitu. Sorry, ya, itu ngejuk aja, nggak ada urusannya. Oke, Prof. Mary, ada 2 question for you too. Boleh jawab dalam 5 menit lah karena masa terhad, karena kita nak dengar juga dari kawan Nagoya nanti apa dikata. Please, Prof. You unmute first. Yes.
Okay, thank you, Prof. Sharul. Just now the first question was apakah persediaan keluarga sebelum kelahiran ibu tersebut, betul ke?
Umum, betul. The first time.
Okay, the second question apa?
Yang kedua dia tanya, apa sahaja makanan yang bagus untuk dikonsumsi semasa hamil dan apa
Okey.
pantangan.
Alright. Okey, boleh. Tak ada masalah. Okey. Persediaan keluarga tu penting. Sebab apa? Kita nak terima ibu tu dengan anak dia. Alright. Jadi persediaan keluarga dari segi psikologi, okey, emosi dan juga fizikal. Sebab kita nak bawa ibu bersama anak ke dalam keluarga kita. Jadi kalau kita belum ada persediaan psikologi bahawa ada perkara yang baru hendak berlaku, iaitu ibu ni akan balik dengan anak, ada kerja tambahan satu. Kita kena bantu ibu yang baru lahirkan anak, kita kena bantu ibu tu, kita kena bantu bayi tersebut. Okey, psikologi. Fizikal tu banyak, mereka kena sediakan diri dia berkaitan dengan fizikal, kerana mereka kena sentiasa sihat supaya mereka boleh, kalau mereka sihat baru boleh tolong ibu yang lahirkan anak, kan? Yang baby yang baru datang balik dari hospital. Kalau mereka sendiri tak sihat, bagaimana mereka nak bantu ibu yang balik daripada hospital, nak ikuti pantang, nak jaga baby. Ibu tu pun tengah belum sedia untuk layan anak dia sendiri. Jadi yang keluarga mereka kena sihat. Okey, lepas tu mereka kena sedia untuk tolong wanita tersebut. Lepas tu persediaan dari segi ekonomi. Okey, kita tak tahu yang baru lahirkan anak tu mungkin muda, mungkin tahap ekonomi tak mantap, mungkin persediaan dia belum cukup, persediaan macam pakaian baby, mungkin duit untuk makanan mereka, duit untuk confinement, iaitu wanita nak urut, kan, mak bidan dan sebagainya. Kalau mereka tak ada duit tu, kita kena tanyalah sama ada suami dia, isteri dia telah sediakan, kita bantu. Okey, selain daripada tu premis, okey, ada ke tempat yang sesuai untuk mereka duduk di rumah. Lepas tu ada ke suami isteri boleh ada privacy, sama-sama menjaga anak dan sebagainya. Okey, itu lepas tu kerjasama daripada keluarga. Semua kena kerjasama supaya kita bukan saja bila ibu tu balik ke rumah, bukan kita hanya sayang pada anak saja, hanya layan anak dia saja. Cantiknya, comelnya, cute-nya, kita kena layan ibu yang telah lahirkan anak sebab dia pernah lahirkan anak. Kita kena puji dia. Tania, cantik, baby cantik macam awak. Dan sebagainya. Jadi ini beri motivasi yang tinggi pada ibu tersebut, jadi dia rasa dihargai. Jangan kita sayang pada anak, tak nilai wanita yang telah lahirkan anak. Ucapkan tahniah pada isteri tersebut, pada suami tersebut. Tahniah telah membawa satu zuriat yang baru kepada keluarga kita. Jadi ini semua adalah persediaan. Okey, jadi untuk mengadakan satu hubungan yang baik. Okey, itu saja berkaitan dengan persediaan yang ringkas, 5 minit je, kan? Okey, makanan tu sama. Makanan seperti apa yang itu semasa hamil, makan sama seperti dahulu. Iaitu kalau Malaysia ikut piramid makanan, iaitu kanji-kanji, okey, lepas tu protein, pelbagai protein, lepas tu mengambil sayur-sayuran, buah-buahan, okey, dan apa ke makanan-makanan yang disukai menurut dalam piramid makanan. Kalau tak suka A, ambil B, dia tak suka B, ambil C, begitu. Tetapi semasa hamil tu dia kena makan makanan tambah, iaitu 500 kalori tambahan. Okey, kadang-kadang dia lebih terpulang pada kerja-kerja yang dia buat. Okey, adakah dia memerlukan tenaga yang lebih sebab dia hendak fetus yang sedang membesar menerima bekalan ni. Kalau dia tidak mengambil kalori secukupnya, kalori itu disedut melalui makanan tu diterjemahkan ke kalori dan disedut kepada fetus kerana pembentukan darah dia, tulang dia dan sebagainya, ibu boleh mengalami anemia. Bila anemia atau kurang darah semasa lahirkan anak, dia boleh ada risiko untuk pendarahan, iaitu postpartum hemorrhage. Dia kena makan secukupnya, kalori yang bertambah. Okey, 500 kalori, dan selepas lahirkan anak pun dia kena ambil tambahan kalori tersebut, okey, untuk memberi penyusuan pada anak. Itu adalah makanan-makanan. Okey, makanan semasa pantang, orang Melayu dengan orang Indonesia lebih kurang sama. Dia kata tak boleh minum air banyak. Kalau minum air banyak ada masalah. Sebenarnya kena minum air banyak supaya pengedaran darah yang baik. Selepas tu kurangkan sembelit. Kalau tak kurangkan sembelit, kalau ada turisan atau kejahitan di bawah perineum, kalau sembelit tak cukup air, bila dia teran sakit di bahagian sana. Jadi boleh membawa masalah dan sebagainya. So kena ambil air secukupnya. Tak adalah pantang, dia kata tak boleh makan ikan, tak boleh makan ayam, tak boleh makan telur. Luka tu akan bernanah, tapi kajian-kajian tidak mengatakan tu. Kena makan sebab ini adalah protein yang menyembuhkan tisu. Kita kena terangkan pada ibu tersebut apakah fakta-fakta, apakah bukti-bukti, apakah evidence dan sebagainya. Okey. Dan saya rasa ini sajalah, lebih kurang saya rasa kamu semua tahu benda ni, tapi hanya nak memantapkan je lah. Thank you.
Kan memang kalau perkara air tu dekat Batam tu kan dia island kan, banyak air kan. Jadi ibu itu air tu dekat Batam tu karena dia adalah island kan. Tapi
Yelah.
kita nak tahu sekarang macam mana Batam yang ada University Nagoya Indonesia. Short video Ida Gumilang will be to share. Kita boleh lihat University Nagoya Indonesia itu macam mana sekarang ini. Indah, my friend, nak tampakkan kebun University Nagoya. Jadi ke mau pergi bagi video itu Kang Indah? Kalau tak apa-apa, terus Bu Aini nak presentation.
Okay, dah sedia dah. Okay. So I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, very good. Very good
Okay.
From the question.
Okay. Thank you. Alright, thank you.
Silakan Bu Aini dalam masa yang cepat supaya kita boleh masuk. Mana Ibu Aininya? Apa kena asuh? Nah, silakan. Asuhan kebidanan dalam pendekatan case tadi. Nah, silakan. Suaranya belum dengar lagi.
Saya mau ya Pak. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon. Sebelumnya perkenalkan, salam kenal Prof. Mariam, Dr. Eri sama Prof. Syahrul ya Pak ya. Oke, perkenalkan saya Nur Aini, dosen di Nagoya University, Nagoya Indonesia. Oke. Hari ini izinkan saya Pak, kebanyakan nanti sepertinya pakai bahasa Indonesia ya Pak ya, ibu-ibu partisipan yang lain.
Bahasa Indonesia nggak apa, jangan kebanyakan waktu ya, karena sudah sore.
Oke, siap Pak. Ini dipersingkat Pak.
Oh iya.
Oke. Untuk hari ini saya bahas tentang asuhan kebidanan dalam pendekatan studi kasus, tentunya yang berkaitan dengan isu-isu kebidanan yang lagi marak di Indonesia sekarang. Kalau Prof. Mariam tadi bahas tentang kejadian yang terjadi di Malaysia, ini izinkan saya bahas tentang beberapa yang lagi booming di Indonesia. Untuk asuhan kehamilan itu di Indonesia disesuaikan dengan filosofi dalam asuhan kebidanan, di mana kehamilan dan persalinan itu adalah kejadian normal yang terjadi secara alami. Kemudian setiap perempuan, setiap wanita itu memiliki hak yang memutuskan untuk asuhan apa yang bisa dia dapatkan. Kemudian asuhan kebidanan memberikan pelayanan secara profesional dengan cara berkolaborasi dengan tenaga kesehatan lainnya seperti dokter, perawat, ahli gizi, kemudian farmasi, dan yang lain-lain. Kemudian asuhan kehamilan dilakukan untuk mengoptimalkan kesehatan pada ibu dan bayi baru lahir tentunya. Kemudian perlu dipahami bahwa setiap perempuan itu memiliki kepribadian yang unik dan masing-masing berbeda. Dan setiap kehamilan itu pasti berbeda. Jadi dari kehamilan pertama, kedua, ketiga, keluhan yang dialami juga pasti berbeda. Setelah itu, pemberian asuhan itu dilakukan dengan memperlihatkan prinsip fisiologis. Jadi fisiologisnya kehamilan itu bagaimana? Jadi asuhan yang kita berikan harus sesuai dengan fisiologis tersebut. Kemudian fokus pelayanan asuhan kebidanan khususnya pada kehamilan adalah peningkatan kesehatan dan pencegahan terjadinya komplikasi. Ini ada kualitas pelayanan kebidanan itu ada 6. Yang pertama efektivitasnya. Kemudian access to service, jadi akses ke pelayanan kesehatan, ke BPM, ke klinik, ke rumah sakit, ke puskesmas, dan yang lain-lain. Kemudian kompetensi teknik. keamanan, safety-nya, kemudian hubungan antar manusia, interpersonal relationship, kemudian ramah tamah. Untuk tujuan asuhan itu ada 6. Yang pertama, untuk memastikan atau memantau kesehatan ibu dan tubuh kembang janin. Kemudian yang kedua, mempertahankan dan meningkatkan kesehatan biologis, psikologis seperti yang sudah dibahas sebelumnya, spiritual dan kultural ibu dan janin. Kemudian mendeteksi dini jika ada bahaya yang terjadi pada ibu dan janin. Contohnya seperti yang dijelaskan sama Prof. Maryam tadi, misalnya kehamilan dengan diabetes mellitus, untuk mendeteksi supaya ibu hamil tadi tidak mengalami diabetes mellitus, hipertensi, dan yang seterusnya. Kemudian mempersiapkan persalinan normal, aman, dan nyaman. Mempersiapkan ibu untuk bisa menjalani masa nifas dengan baik, kemudian untuk menerima kelahiran bayi tentunya. Untuk lingkupnya ada 3. Yang pertama, intervensi gizi selama kehamilan seperti yang udah dijelaskan sama Prof. Eri tadi yang awal-awal, bagaimana intervensi gizi selama kehamilan. Kemudian yang kedua ada tindakan pencegahan dan komplikasi. Kemudian intervensi ketidaknyamanan yang dialami ibu pada kehamilan fisiologis. Jadi dalam kehamilan fisiologis ada beberapa ketidaknyamanan yang dialami ibu hamil. Contohnya kayak morning sickness, sembelit, apalagi misalnya sering buang air kecil dan yang lain-lain. Yang masih fisiologis. Kemudian masalah yang bisa dianalisis dalam asuhan kebidanan itu pertama harus tahu dulu faktor resikonya. Kemudian untuk studi kasusnya ya tadi, ada penyebab. Apa penyebabnya tadi? Misalnya terpapar karena berlebihan asupan makanankah dia, atau misalnya kurang istirahatkah dia, kita telusuri dulu. Saya kayak anemia, apa penyebabnya ibu tadi mengalami anemia? Seperti itu. Kemudian kejadian yang berhubungan dengan kasus maupun tindakan, kemudian reaksi dari kasus terhadap suatu perlakuan atau pemaparan tertentu. Untuk ruang lingkup dan cangkupannya dalam asuhan kebidanan, itu ibu hamil fisiologis dan patologis, meskipun tidak semua patologis bisa ditolong sama bidan. Kemudian ibu bersalin, fisiologis dan patologis, ibu nifas, bayi baru lahir, KB, dengan masalah kesehatan reproduksi, misalnya amenore, oligomenorea, dan yang lain-lain. Kemudian gangguan kesehatan reproduksi remaja sampai premenopause. Kemudian bayi balita sakit dan tumbuh kembang bayi balita, kesehatan dan kesejahteraan perempuan, individu atau keluarga dengan masalah kebidanan komunitas. Kita bahas hak wanita hamil. Itu yang pertama, ibu berhak mendapatkan pelayanan komprehensif. Maksudnya itu adalah pelayanan yang benar-benar dari awal sampai habis. Apa aja haknya? Misalnya ibunya berhak untuk mendapatkan nutrisi yang baik, yang seimbang, kemudian ibu berhak untuk mendapatkan fasilitas kesehatan yang baik, apalagi sarana prasarana dan yang lain-lain. Kemudian ibu hamil berhak menerima informasi secara jelas mengenai keadaan diri dan janin. Jadi kalau misalnya yang terbaru Dinas Kesehatan Indonesia, setahu saya yang terbaru, kunjungan ANC itu, antenatal care itu kan dulunya 4 kali, ini ditambah 6 kali, 2 kali USG, 4 kali kunjungan ke bidan minimal. Ya, jadi ketika kunjungan ke bidan, ke klinik atau ke rumah sakit atau hospital, ketika melakukan pemeriksaan itu pasti dapat tuh apa aja hasil pemeriksaannya. Kalau misalnya terjadi komplikasi atau indikasi untuk mengalami komplikasi apa saja, nah itu kita jelaskan semua. Jadi resikonya apa yang bakal terjadi untuk ibunya maupun pada janin yang dikandung itu kita jelaskan secara rinci karena dia berhak mengetahui kondisi ibunya sendiri dan kondisi janin yang dikandung. Kemudian ibu hamil berhak mengajukan pertanyaan, terutama kalau ibu hamil yang hamil pertama kali, otomatis belum ada pengalaman sama sekali, baru pertama kali merasakan, kemudian pasti timbul banyak pertanyaan, apalagi kalau misalnya dengar dari tetangga, dari A, dari B, mengatakan bahwa seperti ini yang membuat ibunya panik. Kemudian ibu hamil berhak mendapatkan asuhan kehamilan yang aman, nyaman, efektif, dan efisien. Untuk kompetensi prakehamilan dan kehamilan, itu yang pertama ada penilaian kesehatan perempuan, janin, promkes. Promkes ini berkaitan dengan penyuluhan kesehatan, berkaitan dengan masalah apa yang dialami sama ibu hamilnya tadi, dan kesejahteraan. Kemudian deteksi komplikasi selama kehamilan, contohnya misalnya, kalau misalnya keluarga tersebut ada riwayat diabetes mellitus, berarti harus kita deteksi awal bagaimana apakah ibunya juga resiko mengalami diabetes mellitus atau tidak. Kalau risiko apa yang harus dilakukan untuk mencegah agar ibunya tidak mengalami diabetes mellitus. Seperti itu. Kemudian perawatan perempuan dengan kehamilan yang tidak terduga. Misalnya ibunya tidak pasang KB, tapi tidak pengen punya anak lagi misalnya. Atau misalnya pakai KB alamiah. Tahu-tahu misalnya udah hamil 5 bulan atau 3 bulan misalnya seperti itu. Jadi perlu diperhatikan perawatan apa yang dilakukan pada kehamilan yang tidak terduga tadi. Untuk pemeliharaan prakehamilan itu pertama ada anatomi dan fisiologi perempuan dan laki-laki yang seperti dibilang Prof. Syahrul tadi bahwa bukan hanya perempuan saja tapi laki-lakinya juga harus tahu, suaminya juga harus tahu tentang reproduksi dan perkembangan seksual, terus bagaimana perkembangan janin tadi dan seperti itu. Kemudian aspek sosial budaya dari seksualitas manusia, kemudian screening berbasis bukti. Kemudian ada mengidentifikasi dan membantu mengurangi hambatan terkait dengan mengakses dan menggunakan layanan kesehatan seksual dan reproduksi, kemudian menilai status gizinya bagaimana, status imunisasinya, kalau ibu hamil itu ada imunisasi TT, udah berapa kali ibunya melakukan imunisasi TT, nah itu perlu diperhatikan. Kemudian perilaku sehatnya. Nah, kemudian memberikan konseling tentang suplemen gizi. Kemudian untuk menentukan status kesehatan wanita, yang pertama fisiologi siklus menstruasi dan ovulasi. Jadi mengapa bisa terjadi menstruasi, kapan terjadinya ovulasi, seorang perempuan itu harus tahu. Apalagi kalau misalnya dia mau program kehamilan, itu harus tahu kapan ovulasinya. Waktu kapan-kapan saja yang baik untuk koitus misalnya. Kemudian untuk komponen riwayat kesehatan komprehensif, kemudian komponen kondisi fisik lengkap dan kondisi kesehatan. Di mana menginformasikan kehamilan dan memperkirakan usia kehamilan dari riwayat, misalnya dari perhitungan, kalau kita di Indonesia ada perhitungan HPHT namanya. Jadi dihitung hari pertama, hari terakhirnya tanggal berapa, kemudian dihitung udah berapa usia kehamilannya. Kemudian dilakukan pemeriksaan fisik dari head to toe, dari kepala sampai ke ujung kaki, termasuk pemeriksaan ANC. Uji laboratorium untuk yang beresiko, misalnya ibunya ada keluhan mengarah ke anemia, untuk menegakkan atau menganalisis diagnosa tadi, biar lebih jelas kita lakukanlah pemeriksaan HB, misalnya seperti itu, untuk memastikan apakah ibunya mengalami anemia atau tidak. Kemudian ada pemeriksaan USG. Dapatkan riwayat kesehatan yang komprehensif, kemudian melakukan pemeriksaan fisik lengkap, dapatkan sampel biologis untuk tes laboratorium, bagikan informasi tentang kondisinya, kemudian kalau misalnya terdapat ada tanda-tanda komplikasi atau bagaimana, itu bisa dijelaskan langsung. Kemudian menilai status imunisasi dan memperbarui sebagaimana data yang ditemukan. Kemudian yang terakhir itu didiskusikan temuan dan implikasi potensial dengan seorang wanita dan saling menentukan rencana perawatan. Kalau misalnya di Indonesia, setahu saya kasusnya yang masih tinggi itu kejadian anemia, itu masih tinggi tuh. Makanya rata-rata kalau misalnya ke BPM mungkin tidak dilakukan pemeriksaan laboratorium untuk cek HB, tapi di puskesmas itu biasanya dilakukan pemeriksaan cek HB. Untuk di Kota Batam, setahu saya di puskesmas dilakukan pemeriksaan cek HB untuk ibu hamil. Promosi dan dukungan perilaku sehat yang meningkatkan kesejahteraan itu misalnya kalau memberikan obat, misalnya ibunya sakit diberikan obat, harus tahu apa efek obat tadi untuk janin, kemudian efek nutrisi yang tidak membandai dan pekerjaan fisik yang berat. Kalau misalnya ibunya dalam keadaan hamil tapi tetap beraktivitas misalnya atau tetap bekerja. Kemudian dampak kondisi sosial, lingkungan, dan ekonomi yang merugikan pada kesehatan ibu dan janin. Kemudian efek penggunaan tembakau dan paparan asap rokok, penggunaan alkohol dan obat-obatan terlarang. Kemudian ada SDM, strategi untuk mencegah dan menanggulangi risiko penularan penyakit dari ibu ke anak, seperti misalnya penularan IMS, kemudian efek kekerasan berbasis gender, pelecehan emosional, dan pengabaian fisik. Kemudian, oke, baik Pak. Saya lanjut, ini masih bisa dibaca sebenarnya. Oke, saya bahas ini ya. Untuk ongoing care of woman and newborn itu ada 6. Yang pertama penilaian ibu dan bayi yang berkelanjutan. Kemudian ada pendidikan kesehatan, dukungan untuk menyusui, deteksi komplikasi, stabilisasi dan rujukan dalam keadaan darurat, dan penyediaan layanan keluarga berencana. Ini yang pertama memberikan perawatan pasca natal untuk wanita sehat. Jadi setelah melahirkan tadi, perawatannya apa yang diberikan? Ya, ada banyak. Ada 6. Kemudian yang kedua itu adalah memberikan perawatan kepada bayi baru lahir yang sehat. Mulai dari pertumbuhannya dari 0 bulan sampai 1000 kelahiran pertama. Kemudian ada promosikan dan dukung menyusui. Nah, ini yang perlu diperhatikan karena masih banyak ibu-ibu yang tidak memberikan ASI eksklusif pada bayinya. Ini berkaitan nanti dengan kejadian stunting. Kemudian yang keempat, mendeteksi, mengobati, dan menstabilkan komplikasi pasca natal pada wanita dan merujuk seperlunya. Ini. Kemudian menyediakan layanan keluarga berencana untuk alat kontrasepsi. Jadi disesuaikan dengan kebutuhan ibunya bagaimana, apakah dia mau KB jangka panjang kah, jangka pendek kah. Nah, nanti disesuaikan metode kontrasepsi apa yang cocok sesuai dengan status kesehatan. Nah, ini kasus yang lagi mulai digerakkan, lagi marak sekarang itu adalah kasus stunting. Jadi kejadian stunting itu dapat dicegah dengan 8.000 hari pertama kelahiran, kemudian 8.000 investasi kesehatan anak dan remaja. Nah, 1.000 HPK sebagai prioritas dalam pembangunan, hal ini tidak cukup sebenarnya. Kemudian dibutuhkan sebuah upaya yang sistematis dan intervensi yang tepat, kemudian perlunya perhatian pada 7.000 HPK, selanjutnya intervensi 7.000 hari dari masa kanak-kanak ke remaja sering diabaikan. Saya ada datang ke sebuah seminar yang
waktunya sudah terlalu banyak. Jadi saya mungkin bisa disimpulkan saja gimana ya?
Oke, ini Pak. Ada 3 fase kehidupan di 1.000 hari pertama kehidupan. Ini dari hamil, persiapan dari sebelum hamil diperhatikan dari nutrisi, gizi, segala macam kebutuhan ibu dan janin. Kemudian 730 hari ketika dia baru lahir, sampai usia balita, sampai ke usia 5 tahun. Kemudian bisa diperbaiki itu di usia 5 sampai 9 tahun. Nanti mengikuti perkembangannya 10 sampai 14 tahun, 15 sampai 19 tahun. Dan akan berhenti pertumbuhan di usia 20 tahun. Oke, ini kayaknya bisa dibaca aja.
Iya.
Ini dia yang terakhir ya, secara global 1 dari 3 anak di bawah usia 5 tahun tidak tumbuh dengan baik atau mengalami stunting, kurus atau overweight. Kemudian secara global target penurunan stunting anak di bawah usia 5 tahun sebesar 40% pada tahun 2025. Kemudian Kemenkes menyatakan bahwa data Kementerian Kesehatan tahun 2018 menyatakan sebanyak 3 dari 10 anak di Indonesia bertubuh pendek. Jadi secara global itu 15-17% untuk kejadian stunting di Indonesia. Ini beberapa isu yang terjadi untuk ANC, INC, PNC, bayi baru lahir, bayi dan balita. Kemudian yang terakhir ada KB dan KESPRO. Ini contoh yang paling banyak terjadi. Oke, sekian dari saya. Thank you. Saya
Thank you.
tutup. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat sore.
Ibu Aini kirim email address aja di chatbox, nanti boleh Prof. Mary juga akan bisa komunikasi langsung nanti untuk berbagi pengalaman juga Ibu Eri ya. Ini ada satu pertanyaan saya baca untuk Ibu Aini, tapi boleh jawab dalam 2 menit saja ya karena masanya. Bagaimana perhatian dan penghargaan pemerintah Indonesia terhadap profesi kebidanan? Apa advice atau nasihat Bu Aini untuk generasi muda yang mau jadi bidan? Nah, itu Ibu Prof. Mari mau tahu bagaimana attention and appreciation of government Indonesia kepada profesi midwifery. Silakan dijawab dalam 2 menit Ibu Aini dari Ayu.
Kalau dari pemerintah Indonesia, sebenarnya ini kita karena ada organisasi di Indonesia namanya Ikatan Bidan Indonesia, jadi berkaitannya ke sana semua. Jadi kalau misalnya untuk motivasi dan segala macam yang berkaitan dengan supaya orang mau menjadi seorang bidan, itu lebih ke ditentukan dulu, misalnya dia fokusnya kemana, seperti itu. Jadi kan seorang bidan itu kan ada di bagian pelayanan, pendidikan, dan penelitian. Jadi fokusnya dulu harus ditentukan kemana. Kalau misalnya dia nyamannya di pelayanan misalnya, jadi pasti ada kayak pendidikan yang harus ditempuh misalnya. Kalau dia di pelayanan, otomatis dia pendidikannya apa? Minimal harus diploma 3. Setahu saya di Indonesia sekarang untuk meningkatkan SDM, minimal untuk yang membuka praktek atau membuka klinik, itu harus profesi, setahu saya sekarang. Profesi, jadi harus S1 profesi, plus profesi. Kalau misalnya bekerja di rumah sakit atau ke klinik, jadi kita bekerja di tempat orang lain, itu minimal diploma untuk di Indonesia.
Ya.
Kalau misalnya dia mau ke pendidikan, otomatis harus minimal strata 2 seperti itu. Jadi fokusnya harus kemana dulu. Jadi bisa kita jelaskan, kalau saya pribadi menjelaskan ke mahasiswa yang D3, saya jelaskan ke mereka, kalian fokusnya mau kemana. Kalau misalnya mau buka BPM, berarti kalian harus melanjutkan studinya ke jenjang yang lebih tinggi, seperti itu. Kalau misalnya apresiasi itu lebih ke peningkatan pendidikan tadi, itu sudah merupakan salah satu dorongan dari pemerintah bagaimana untuk meningkatkan kualitas SDM di Indonesia.
Yes.
Sekian Pak dari saya.
Ya, kalau mau jadi bidan karena supaya bisa merawat suami, nanti D3 ada cukup ya. Oke, bisa ditutup aja. Wah, Ibu Eri boleh bagi closing remark 1-2 menit, nanti Prof. Mary dan Ibu Susi mungkin nanti closing masing-masing 2 menit karena masa kita tinggal 5 menit. Sebab kita ada latong nanti menarik sekali karena berkaitan dengan tanda-tanda yang Ibu Eri kasih tahu tadi. Silakan Bu Eri closing remark. Hantar email address di chatbox supaya boleh komunikasi dengan Prof. Mary, dengan Pak Aini dan seterusnya. Saya ini connecting people of speaker. Silakan Bu Eri. Closing remark, kata penutup Bu Eri, you can to unmute first.
Ya, maaf, masih di mute tadi. Ya, baik, terima kasih. Thank you very much for all participant. Ya, just one words ya. Jadi kalau menurut saya satu kata ya, karena memang bahwa kehamilan adalah sebuah proses yang alamiah, yang sifatnya adalah sesuatu yang sifat alami, dan banyak terjadi perubahan-perubahan yang secara alamiah juga terjadi di dalam tubuh manusia ya. Dan pastinya untuk mencapai generasi unggul ya, memang sudah harus sejak di awal kehamilan seperti itu. Karenanya kita memang kita mau menciptakan generasi unggul yang seperti apa, itulah di mana kita bisa berupaya yang sebaik-baiknya untuk di masa kehamilan ini mempersiapkan mungkin sebelumnya ya, sebelum masa kehamilan. Jadi pada wanita usia subur ya, itu adalah proses di mana mempersiapkan kelak nanti untuk para wanita itu masuki masa kehamilan, dan air adalah salah satunya yang bisa membantu seluruh metabolisme zat-zat gizi yang masuk ke dalam tubuh dan membantu untuk pengeluaran sisa metabolisme dari dalam tubuh. Karenanya meskipun ada zat-zat gizi makro dan mikro, tidak lupa kita harus bisa mementingkan yang keenam zat gizi, yaitu air.
Oke,
Itu dari
baik.
saya.
Terima kasih Bu. Jadi apabila sejak hamil sudah disiapkan untuk jadi bayi unggul, maka setelah besar masuklah esa unggul. Oke,
Bisa aja.
Bro Mary, closing remark, you nak baca pantun apa nak nyanyi? Mana satu? Please. Oke. Unmute first. Unmute first. Masih mute lagi, kena unmute. Coba dibagi unmute, boleh tak?
Alright. Thank you, Prof. Syarul. Alright.
Baik.
Tema hari ini ya untuk conference kita adalah midwives need a deeper understanding on physiology of pregnancy. Tapi saya telah pergi beyond that, not only the physiology but to manage the pregnancy.
Boring, no problem. About mix of knowledge, no problem.
Okay, deeper understanding, because midwife not only manage the pregnancy but labor and puerperium. So as I told you just now, the only strongest woman become midwife. Because this is a challenging area, because mereka tak ikut apa arahan doktor, tapi mereka buat keputusan. Mereka lihat, mereka buat keputusan. Mereka panggil doktor atau mereka buat keputusan dan bekerja sama-sama. Atau mereka uruskan dulu baru panggil doktor sebab keperluan tu ada di situ. Jadi message saya di sini, pada dahulu tadi saya kata setiap bidan patut highly intellectual, sambung belajar. Diploma, degree, midwifery, masters and also PhD, supaya kita ni intellectual, boleh aplikasi secara analytical dan membuat keputusan dan dihormati oleh pihak-pihak lain sama ada pakar dan sebagainya. Jadi ini adalah mesej saya, sambung belajar, berani sambung belajar, jadi good analytical decision makers and work collaboratively. Thank you.
Bagus sekali advice from Mary. Sebab tadi Aini bilang, you kalau diplomat, you nak jadi supporter kepada service in hospital, tapi you nak menjadi midwifery, you nak continue to study, but if you want to become lecturer, you must be to master. Jadi terus kalau you nak jadi rektor macam Ibu Susi, kena pergi terus ke PhD. Jadi macam itulah lebih kurangnya. Tadi Puan bagus kata tadi, you nak guna doktor atau nak kena midwifery masa you nak apa itu tadi give birth. Saya berpengalaman masa anak saya nombor 1 guna midwifery, tapi lepas tu saya sudah kalang kabut sebab ini apa dia punya tali pusatnya sudah terlilit di leher, jadi nak keluar. Jadi saya tak mau lagi menggunakan, kalau tak guna doktor, karena saya sudah kapok, kata orang Jakarta. Kapok itu dah jera. Jadi terus guna doktor better. Bu Susi, 1-2 minit boleh cakap untuk mengapresiasi Ibu Eri dan Prof Mary yang sangat luar biasa. Padahal saya sendiri baru biasa di luar. Silakan.
Baik, terima kasih Prof Reza. Luar biasa ya, sore ini kita dapat pengalaman ini. Tentunya untuk mendapatkan bayi yang sehat, yang paling utama adalah ibu sehat ya. Jadi perlu ya. Terima kasih. Tadi luar biasa juga Prof Mariamah ya, menyampaikan beberapa teknik karena pengalaman di lapangan ya, ternyata senior lecture juga di rumah sakit juga. Begitu juga Dokter Eri tadi luar biasa penyampaian tentang gizi-gizi yang diperlukan oleh ibu hamil ya. Juga Bu Aini tadi juga sudah menyampaikan, kebetulan juga memang Ini sharing yang luar biasa. Jadi kita berbicara kesehatan itu tidak satu sisi, beberapa sisi dan beberapa komponen harus saling beriringan dan bersamaan. Ini luar biasa dan mudah-mudahan kita semua mendapat manfaat lah dari tadi yang udah luar biasa dari 3 narasumber yang hebat dan berpengalaman dan di bidangnya. Itu saja mungkin Prof. Reza, sekaligus saya menyampaikan selamat menyambut bulan puasa Ramadan. Mohon maaf lahir dan batin. Besok 2 hari lagi kita nak fasting, Mrs. Mariamah, Prof. Mariamah. Terima kasih, itu saja.
Terima kasih semua, terima kasih banyak.
Saya assalamualaikum.
Terima kasih.
Kapan-kapan Prof. Mary kita undang pagi General Lecture di Batam. Jadi Ibu,
Mudah-mudahan.
ya itu sih kalau lihat Prof. Mari ini dia selain mengajar di Mahta University di Monash. Monash itu kampus Australia yang ada cabangnya di Malaysia. Jadi kalau beliau dijemput itu sudah tampak lah dia famous lah.
Insyaallah apa saya ke Malaysia saya cari nanti Prof. Mariamah.
Please, sila datang. Saya duduk di Johor Bahru sebelah Singapura.